A film on filmmaking of a classic is one of the toughest works a director might have at hand. The subject matter is already celebrated, leaving room for continual critique. The anecdotes associated would mostly be known like the trajectory of the narrative with minimal scope for dramatic expositions. And if it's about the making of Pother Pachali by a director, you can very well consider it to be the origin story of God for a society that suffers from nostalgia from time unknown. The perils are multifold. A mass would be hypercritical of creative choices with a subject involving a cultural icon like Satyajit Ray. And a class would be super snobbish, disapproving of further milking of nostalgia. And then, if the director himself considers his central character to be his biggest inspiration, reason for creative affiance, the risk quotient goes higher, as the film now runs the threat of turning into an idol worship vehicle more than anything else. Contrary to all such doubts, Anik Dutta's Aparajito works as a disciplined look at the pivotal time in Satyajit Ray's life that examines his persona as well as the struggles of making Pother Pachali. There are a few issues we had with the film, but not enough to damage the pleasant aftertaste. And here we are bringing to you our thoughts on the film, having watched it on the first day of its theatrical release in one of the few shows that the film has managed in the city. Somewhere around the middle of the film, there's this sequence of shooting one of the finest sequences of Pother Pachali. The scenes where Oppu and Durga follow a sweet seller on his way with a dog following the three of them. We see Shubir, the character standing for Subrata Mitro, Ray's cinematographer in his early masterpieces, coming up with the idea about capturing the frames as reflections on the adjacent pond. Then we also find how Minku, the character standing for Bijoy Roy, Satyajit's wife, comes up with the idea to make the dog follow Oppu and Durga, which it wasn't up to take after take. Now, in any other Bengali movie by most other celebrated directors of the industry, this would be a moment of emotional millage. Satyajit, aka Aparajito Roy, going over to his wife Minku, acknowledging her intellect and contributions with moist dialogue exchanges. But here we watch Aparajito to just turn halfway towards Minku and say thanks in his baritone voice. That's it. And this is where Anik Dutta's film succeeds more than anything else. In its controlled approach, doing away with excesses and thus bringing out the order and discipline in Satyajit's personality. The man was multi-talented, but it was his sincere homework and clinical approach that made his art what they are. And this film brings out that aspect of Ray so well without directly highlighting at any point of time. We never see the character of Aparajito being hyper-dramatic. Not when he has his shots as he wished, not when things are not moving well, and not even in his felicitations and disapprovals. A call comes from one of the most celebrated figures of modern cinema to express how the Oppu trilogy has inspired him, and we watch Aparajito listening to him in silence, answering just enough to acknowledge his gratitude. That was the man, always crisp and clear in his exchanges, while the emotion, thrill and drama was to be experienced in his art in his unique and original way. And that makes the behind-the-scenes sections of Aparajito the best parts of the film. It is also a film about the acknowledgement of the contributions of Bijoy Roy and other members of Satyajit's unit like Subrata Mitro or Banshi Chandragupta that keep on coming across the film. Anik Dutta, a self-proclaimed Ray fanatic, does not get carried away in suggesting Pother Pachali was a one-man show. Instead, the support in terms of creative ideas and financial aids from friends and family or cooperation from his advertising firm constitute chunk of the film. Anik, like his idol, does his homework well. In fact, he constructs the entire film based on this homework of collecting anecdotes from all possible sources available, and then puts them in a sequence, one after the other, connected through a long interview of Aparajito, aka Satyajit, for All India Radio. Thus, the film never lets go its grounded grip. For Satyajit enthusiasts, it becomes an exercise of watching trivia on screen that one has previously read on print, and for others it becomes a bridging of gap between the commoner and the legend. a layman's understanding of how true art requires cooperation, tenacity, and sacrifice at multiple levels. While the film's anecdote-laden tone keeps the proceedings consistently entertaining, it does take away inclusion of any serious drama. Be so, we say, at least that way, Aparajito doesn't turn into another futile attempt on the pedestal of pseudo-creativity. Anik Dutta has to be lauded for his casting choices as well, never letting the provocation of big names take over fitting choices. He does focus on visual semblance for picking his cast, which is not necessarily a requirement for any film, but he also gets the characterizations mostly right. We already spoke about how Aparajito Ray's discipline holds. Do also note Shubir aka Shubroto Mitro's blinking eyes, someone who would have to eventually drop his craft due to eye complications. Note the tone and mannerisms of Paran Bandyopadhyay's Bidhan Roy and how the little Manik aka Opu aka Shubir Banerjee asks if he would also get an award in one of Satyajit's town hall felicitations shown in the film. It reminds of Shubir's life of neglect and deprived acknowledgement, subtle touches that elevate the experience of watching Anik Dutta's Aparajito. Jeetu Kamal as Aparajito aka Satyajit Ray is good, controlled in his mannerisms like the overall film, that automatically provides the necessary gravity to the Orient long man of Indian cinema. However, it's Anik's intelligent positioning across the frames, instantly reminding of familiar Satyajit stills on internet, that works so well for Jeetu's screen presence. Also, while the looks of course work in evoking the aura of Satyajit, as we had seen in the trailers and stills of the film, kudos to voice artist Controversies Roy for lending the baritone voice, which establishes Jeetu's appearance even more than the prosthetics. Now coming to the issues we had with the film. We understand that Anik Da got an approval to make this film on the creative journey behind Pather Pachali, but not for using real names in his film. So it might not be under the control of the film's unit, but the pseudo names do disturb the tone of the film over and over. The innovative alternatives by the writers might sound interesting on paper, but this whole approach of synonymous pseudos gets irritating after a point of time. We are aware of the fanboy Anik Dutta with regard to Satyajit's puzzles, limericks and pseudos, but in Aparajito the idea doesn't fit well. We also wonder why the permission to use real names could not be achieved when there's no doubt for a single person about the real-life characters they are watching on screen, and even the promotions or interviews do not shy away from it in any way. And if the name Satyajit couldn't be used, was it necessary to masquerade Bibhuti Bhushan or Bidhan Roy? We wonder why. Other reference droppings of Satyajit's connections during the early phase of the film feel slightly over the top. It would be fine if there would be a couple of them here and there, but as they keep on coming and coming, it leads to the potential distraction of this parallel motive of catch the reference exercise. It works for the tone of Bhuter Bhavishyat, but perhaps not for a film like Aparajito. And then there's the episodic nature of challenge and solutions. In a short scene, Opu's casting gets resolved, following by Indira Thakuran's, and next comes Durga. A more creative and inconsecutive exposition might have worked better. Or for say the matter Indira Thakuran's deathbed scene is presented. We hear about it somewhere in the middle of the film and watch the rest near the end, thus getting a cinematic echo effect which the other section of the films lack. At the end of it, when we hear a co-audience mentioning to his family about rewatching Pather Pachali once back home, all these issues fade away. After all, amidst surface-level celebrations of the master's birth centenary, here's one man who has deep dived into the creative soul, took efforts to resurface lost trivia and communicate to a TikTok generation in the most accessible way what Satyajit Ray meant for Indian cinema. Is Aparajito among the best-made films on filmmaking? No, it isn't. You have to watch Kiarostami's Close-Up or Fellini's 8.5 for that experience. But Aparajito is also not a gimmicky self-appeasing piece of work that Bengali cinema is known to produce for such subjects. It reaches where it had set up its journey towards, and that's not an easy deal any day. It dodges most of the issues that we had mentioned at the outset and comes across as a clean enough tribute and sincere documentation of an author who took Indian cinema to the world map. That is all from us today. Thank you for watching.